Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chronicles of Hollywood History, past, present, and future. Welcome. And here now, Corey Gomez.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chronicles of Hollywood History, past, present, and future. Today is Halloween, October 31st. I know a lot of people aren't out trick-or-treating, so I am joined today by the writer-director, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, Mr. Tom McLoughlin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure, Corey.
I'm going to ask the question that we all want to know first because I've written papers about this. Who paid for Jason Voorhees' grave?
Who paid for Jason Voorhees' grave?
I mean, everybody has theories. There's no way the town is kicking in for a mass murder. I mean, there's got to be some embalming processes and everything. That we want to know who paid for that tombstone and the burial.
Well, if you want my theory, because this is what I had, in the script and was supposed to be in the movie, but it ended up getting cut out, which was Jason's father. In my original script, at the end, you see the old, caretaker, in the graveyard, and then he turns and he sees this very ominous-looking man, and he goes, "Oh yes, Mr. Voorhees, I'm taking care of everything just like you wanted. Taking care of your wife's and your son's grave here." And then he hands him money and goes, "Oh, thank you, sir, thank you." And then you just see him staring down at the grave, and just the look in his eyes. It's highly suspect that whatever he's seeing and feeling isn't his son down there. So that was like the note we went out on. So it was then used. There's a movie called Vengeance, that the fan film, and they asked my permission if they could basically kind of redo that scene, except this time I'm playing the old caretaker, and C.J. Graham was the father. So kind of recreated that same idea there. But yeah, that's that's kind of why it has really no dates or anything. It's just the name, and that's it. And that tombstone, I can see it out my window now as I look out. It's in my backyard, and kind of in a very, shabby area in the corner, to make it look overgrown and things.
So you obviously then had a plan for Part 7.
No, I actually didn't. I was offered to do Part 7. I mean, literally after the movie opened, and they saw how wonderfully it was received, because I had no idea with the comedy and all that if the fans were going to like it or not. And there was a lot of people that just flat out didn't go to Part 6 because they were so pissed off at 5, and they thought Jason was going to be Tommy Jarvis and not really Jason.
Yeah, 5 was so awful.
I just kind of went in with the thing going, all right, I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to make the best movie I can. It's going to have, obviously an antagonist who's got a reason for being the antagonist, because he was, dug up and electrified, and now he's back, and he doesn't necessarily want to be back. So he's got an agenda with Tommy Jarvis, and Tommy, in the meanwhile, has to try to convince people that Jason's back, that he screwed up here. So I wanted to have that storyline that ultimately, resolves at the end with Jason being put back in Crystal Lake where he first drowned, and said, okay, here's a complete circular thing. That's it. If they want to do something after this, totally up to them. If somebody wants to pick up the Jason's father, storyline, or figure out some way Jason's going to come up from the water, at some point. But I didn't have anything really, really planned. Until literally 2 years ago when I did write a sequel, which takes place 13 years later, which is called Jason Never Dies. And, but I didn't go the route of Jason's father or Tommy Jarvis at all. I'm going completely a different way with girls staying there at a retreat, which is right across the lake from Crystal Lake, and they know nothing about the history because they came in from another state. So it's literally people going, what the hell is going on here? Who is this? And how he gets resurrected this time is very big and theatrical. Something, unfortunately, couldn't afford to do in a fan film. It's literally got to be a studio paid for type movie, because it'd be some expensive stuff that we're doing. Plus, we're doing it all in the snow at night, and then that creates a lot of technical issues that, usually take money and care to make sure, you don't freeze people to death when we try to shoot the movie.
Now, what, excuse me, now, were you a fan of the whole franchise before you directed it?
Actually not, and that was not because I had any, dislike for this, franchise itself. The first one I did see and I really liked, and I loved the whole twist, it being, Jason's, mother that was doing this. And then after that, we got hit with so many, variations of slasher movies. Once everybody saw there was gold in, a killer whose face is covered, who somehow slices up women, and it usually is in a forest or any isolated place. And as a horror filmmaker, it was like anytime I was pitching my other ideas, I was like, nah, can you give us one that's more in the slasher vein? And I just sort of kind of turned off to the whole thing. I didn't want to do one of those, and I didn't go and see, all the many that were coming out. But once I, got the job, then it was like, okay, now I got to go back and watch all of them back to back and try to figure out, if I can at least put some sort of mythology together, based on seeing where the series had gone over the years. So then, as the years have gone on, I've become more and more of a fan, and I've also, come to the realization that all these movies, and it's not just me, I mean, you can pretty much ask any of the filmmakers who were doing movies in the 80s, we were just, doing movies because we wanted to make movies, and it wasn't anything that we thought was going to have, any long-lasting appeal. It's like, yeah, these will never be Frankenstein or Dracula or the Wolfman or the Mummy or any of that. It's going to be for the 80s, and then it'll be forgotten. And much to all of our shock, they have become all those iconic horror for these, next generations. And, Jason, from my standpoint, is only built in popularity. And, I'm just, shocked how well, it's received on all the, favorite of the Friday the 13th. And just in terms of, how many fans keep reaching out. And some of them just saw the movie recently, and some have been, fans for decades. So it's, it's like, there's something here that all of us are, quite happy but surprised that actually, occurred.
Now, you had the opening where, Jason stabbed with the piece of the metal gate, the lightning hits, comes back to life. Was that kind of a Dracula nod? Or not Dracula, God, that was stupid, a Frankenstein nod.
Yeah, Frankenstein, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I teach film now. I'm just a part-time teacher for at Chapman University, Dodge College, and, I'm always encouraging the students to, do the old thing, that, hacks borrow, but artists steal. And if you go through all the history of anything, painting, music, sculpture, whatever, you'll all see that they flat out took, what somebody did before them and copied it. And then as time went on, it slowly became their own. It just evolved into their own work. And so many people are trying to go, I'm just going to make something no one's ever seen before. And it's like, it's not going to happen. The best you can do is try to merge two things. Maybe, that was my approach with Friday. It's like, well, I want to merge the comedy, and the slasher movie, but also, add things that they hadn't done in that series before, which was children, car chase, underwater fight, just put other elements into it. So it comes off as fresh. So it's the same thing here. It's like, it's, people say, where'd you get that? It's like, well, that's Frankenstein, or, that's a kind of thing that I saw in an old Hammer horror movie, or that's a, Exorcist moment. It's like, things that were impressive to me all kind of go into your subconscious, or sometimes it's a very conscious thing going, there's only one way to bring back somebody from the dead, lightning, Yeah. Like that's it. I'm not going to, reinvent, the wheel at this point. And, my problem was, how do I get a bolt of lightning into a coffin where he is? So that I had to kind of, come up with this whole thing of Tommy digging him up and looking at him and freaking out and grabbing the closest thing to him, and, which is that spear. So all these things led up to allowing that lightning, to hit him.
And you had to kill poor Ron Palillo right in the beginning. You had to kill Horseshack in the film.
Yeah, that was, Hawes, that name is based on my best friend, Michael Hawes, who was involved with One Dark Night with me. And so I was actually looking to cast somebody that sort of looked like him. But then when they said, Ron Perlolo was interested, I went, that's great. He's like the perfect kind of sidekick kind of guy, almost like Sal Mineo to James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, this guy that's kind of quirky and it's like, I don't think this is a good idea, kind of nervous guy. But of course the big thing was punching his heart out to give the audience immediately the sense that this is a whole new Jason. This is not a guy that needs a weapon. He can just do it with his hand, twist a head and pull it off. Very unimitatable type kills, which I thought was important too. That he's he's stepped up his game here.
What made you do the James Bond opening?
That was my childhood. That was the first movie my dad took me to, was Dr. No, when I was like 12 years old. And I was just, blown away by James Bond and all the James Bond movies with Sean Connery. And I kind of cooled to the next group of them, the Roger Moore ones. Not that they weren't good, but it was like, I grew up as a kid and a teenager with Sean Connery. So that, was one thing. But the bigger thing was that James Bond franchise was at that time, the biggest franchise, had the most amount of sequels. And I thought, okay, well, we got to part 6. Wouldn't it be fun to kind of nod to the big, king of sequels, James Bond, but do it with Jason. So it also set the tone immediately, for the audience and also the critics that, we were going to have fun with this. It wasn't going to just be a straight out, sit around and wait for the next kill. I wanted to have laughs. I wanted to have characters that you cared about and, try to do a much more broader entertainment, piece with it.
Now, a lot of the movies, they had to trim because they were getting X ratings. They had to trim out all the gore. They had to trim a lot of parts of violence. Your film, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, they actually told you to add violence to it, correct?
No. Well, let me pull that back. We did a screening for a just absolutely wild, crazy crowd that had been standing in line in the sun, to get into the Paramount screening that we were having like at 7 o'clock, and they were in line like at 8 o'clock in the morning. So by the time they got in there, I mean, they were fried. Whether they'd been drinking or smoking or dropping something, they were ready. And so once the film started, they started hooting and hollering and did straight through the whole screening. They just went crazy. And afterwards, the executive producer comes over to me and he goes, "What do you think?" And I go, "I had no idea. I mean, I couldn't hear the lines. I don't know if they thought it was, it was working or not working." He goes, "No, it worked incredible, but we need 3 more kills." I go, "Why?" And he goes, "I just think, we just need 3 more kills of this." And I go, "I got 13 kills. I wanted to keep it at 13.
Yeah, Friday the 13th, 13 kills. It makes sense.
Sorry?
I said, yeah, Friday the 13th, 13 kills. Yeah. That's the perfect number.
Yeah, but I'm really big at trying to, create sort of strange mythology type things. Like the new film I wrote takes place 13 years after, Jason was put down into the water. I just think if you're doing something like that and you're kind of creating its own mythology, have certain things like that sound good around the campfire when you're telling the tale. But Frank Mancuso Jr. said, let's figure out some way to do that. And I went, okay, God, we've killed everybody except the deputies in the prison, and we can't go and build that set. All right, well, we got the caretaker who, we didn't kill, so we can do that. And then I thought, all right, we got one location then that we have to do, so, put 2 lovers out there and, have them get it. So that's 3 kills basically all in the same, same sequence. So for Frank, that was what he wanted. But then when we had to go and show it to the Motion Picture Ratings Board, we had to show it to them 9 times because they kept giving us an X. And mine is fairly tame, compared to some of the others, and particularly, John with Part 7. I mean, he had these gore effects that were just through the roof, incredible, and he really got slammed and cut down. with me, they were just screwing with frames. Take a few more frames off of this, take a few more off of that, and so I lost certain things that were really cool that you didn't get to see the whole effect. But it was them just picking on it, and being upset about the fact it was another slasher film to them. And, we finally got it down. And the last thing that they were the most adamant had to keep being, cut down was the scene with the sheriff getting his body bent backwards and his back breaking, and there's not a drop of blood in it. Just a sound effect. And I was like, why is that a problem? I mean, that's an old kind of gag that I actually did in a Dick Van Dyke sketch years before. And basically the word came back. It's like, it's cumulative. By the time we get to that point, the movie's been so intense that we get to that, and that's just like, enough is enough. So, we had to take away one double cut back and forth of him being, pushed backwards and seeing the sheriff go back further towards his feet. And once we took that out, then they okayed it, and, we got an R.
How come we haven't seen an uncut print of 6 yet? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. In the good old days of film, when you were cutting, you just, you trimmed the pieces off that you had to trim off, and you put it in a box. And, you kept, working on the movie, and that box kind of stayed there in the editing, as the trims. And somehow, over the years, that box disappeared. Nobody and they went looking for it. Nobody knows kind of where all those little pieces went. And the best that I could come up with is I actually had a VHS tape that we made of one of the earlier cuts that had some of the effects in there. Not all of them, but some of them. So that's on one of the supplemental parts on the releases of that. And I guess it's probably in the big box set that just came out, because they have everything.
Yeah, great set. What made you decide to use the Alice Cooper? Because Alice Cooper was kind of, the funny thing is not what people don't realize, not only was Friday the 13th, because like you said, nobody liked 5. So not only was this like Jason's big return, but it's kind of a big return for Alice Cooper, who was inactive for a while as well.
It was. It just sort of worked that way. I had used some of, I can't even remember which song it was at this point, but one of his songs and a part of another one in the temp score that we did. I had a whole bunch of rock and roll stuff in there, because I'm a rock and roller myself, and ironically, my band back in the 60s, we played on the same bill with Alice's band, which was called the Naz at that time. And, we talked to each other a couple of times at Frank Zappa's house in Laurel Canyon at that time. And I just, he was just like this, cool guy named Vincent. And that's all I kind of knew until much, later that I realized Alice Cooper's Vincent. And oh yeah, shit. So I hadn't even seen his show or anything, because I got so, ensconced in the movies and stuff, I wasn't going to concerts like I was before. So when Frank Mancuso, the executive, came and he said, "You got some Alice in there. What would you think about Alice writing a song?" And I go, "God, that would be great." He's interested in that. He goes, "Yeah, his management, all that, they're looking for something to, give Alice a new step forward back in, the limelight." And he had a great new album. So it all kind of, worked out, that the man behind the mask, and then gave us those, other songs to put in there as well. So we really have very much a Alice Cooper soundtrack, which couldn't be better for first an 80s, movie, and second a horror movie. He is the king of rock and roll horror.
There, I read, because over the years you read so many things. Between part 6 and part 9, there's the most stories. I had read like this whole elaborate thing that Jason at one point was supposed to kill all those paint gun people with an Uzi. Is that true?
With an Uzi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't picture that for some reason.
Well, I was, if you watched, the additional supplemental stuff that's in the big box set, there's a short called Legends Never Die, Hollywood Forever, which it's me in like a black and white footage talking about how I wrote, Friday the 13th in the cemetery. And when I first wrote the treatment, I was just kind of coming up with everything I could possibly think of that Jason could use. And that sequence with the paintballers, they were actually hunters. And one guy took, his hunting way more serious than the rest of them did. So he actually had an Uzi strapped on him, along with the machete and his belt with the darts and all that other shit. So when Jason killed him in that earlier draft, he took the Uzi with him. So the next time he saw Jason, he had that strapped on, so that obviously people were going, "Holy shit!" And then that whole scene in the motorhome, when she opens the door, the bathroom door, Jason comes out shooting, and he just completely shoots them up like Bonnie and Clyde. So when she kills Court behind the wheel, then that's what causes the big motorhome accident. But then when I was writing it, I started thinking, this is not right. It's just not right. Jason shouldn't have something so easy as that he can, shoot somebody at a distance. And this thing about him having to be close to you and doing what he does, to me, is a much more frightening, monster. And so I took it out, and I'm really glad that I did, because Nikki's face going into the side of the motorhome, and and that impression, coming through, and, Court going, "Hey, listen to this," and he's listening to Alice Cooper, and if he says, "Listen to this," Jason runs a knife through his ear. I thought those were two more kind of funny, dark humor type things, rather than just, a machine gun. So yeah, that went away, but you can actually read that sequence in the back of the book that Joe Maudry did on me, called A Strange Idea of Entertainment, which is on Amazon, and Joe put in the whole treatment that I wrote in the back of the book, so you can see how pretty much everything stayed the same, but that was one of the big changes.
What is it, do you think, that now ironically, what I find funny is usually it's the first movie, not so much nowadays, but especially back then. The first movie was always the most popular, the most loved. Friday the 13th, it's 50-50. It's part 4 or it's part 6.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's because of the Tommy Jarvis character?
Personally, if somebody says, "What's your favorite Friday the 13th?" I would say part 4 immediately, because I thought Joe Zito did a really good job, directing that movie. I thought the whole idea that you went in, knowing this was going to be it, and everything sort of was, playing into that. This is the last time you're going to see this, and the actors, everybody did a really good job on that. Part 1, I really kind of put it aside. It's like a separate film, because it's not really Jason.
Yeah,
came up with that Carrie-like jump scare at the end. But other than that, it's really kind of an interesting, suspense, murder suspense movie with some incredibly gory effects that we haven't seen before. Certainly, they didn't get that from Halloween. Those are just Tom Savini things were just unbelievable. So part 4, to me, always was the one when I went through all of them that I thought, well, that seems to have all the elements together, with an ending and having, young Tommy looking like, he's crazy now. And so it kind of, felt like that was closure there. But, when they did part 5, they decided we're going to go a whole different direction, because they kind of felt it was, played out with Jason, but obviously it was a big mistake. People did not want to learn that wasn't the real guy. So when I got hired, I had, one mantra that I had to hold up there and say, if nothing else, this is how it has to happen, which is bring Jason back from the dead. Figure it out, and I don't care what else you do, but bring him back. We need to have the, Jason back. So, I think there again, it's the beginning of a new Jason, which most people call the zombie Jason, but I never looked at him as a zombie. I always looked at him like Frankenstein. He was brought back from the dead, resurrected, and he's just more powerful now because of the way he was brought back. But it's not like, to me, the normal zombie rules of, getting shot in the head or, eating whatever, which to me is sort of the way we really think of zombies now, what George Romero taught us.
I mean, the only similarity is Jason doesn't run after you. He walks slow, but still catches up.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess later ones they did have it running, didn't they? Or at least I think
The
of the
remake they did, sort of. He was very briskly walking in the remake, which I didn't hate like a lot of people. I don't know why they had to remake it. You know, I don't know why he had to go into space. Another one I didn't hate, but I mean, they kind of got a little off the rails there. I think they kind of screwed themselves moving it into the future.
Well, yeah, it just got, it got like we have to combine Jason with something else. So whether it was Carrie or, Alien, or going to another city, Manhattan, it was like, what can we do to get it so it's not the same? But for me, it was, when you have these type of stories, there's something about getting it back on the turf where it all happened. It's like that's somehow evil ground and people shouldn't be there, but somehow they end up there and, things play out, but you just have to find ways of doing a variation on a theme that doesn't feel like that's exactly like it always is. There's something different, something that surprises you, but it's hard, to take him up into space or, put him in these other, places. I think Adam Marcus had that problem with Sean Cunningham. Never really liked Jason with the bag over his head or the hockey mask. So by the time I got Jason Goes to Hell, he really wanted him to, come up with something completely different. And so that lots of times it is the people that are behind these movies, paying for them and trying to dictate where they think the audience is going to go are the ones that, make decisions that the fans go, nah, we don't want that. And then there's some that do. They just so love the genre, it doesn't matter what you do. Case in point, I was at a what they call Masters of Horror dinner. It's all of us horror guys used to get together about every 3 months and have dinner together. And I'm talking like everybody from Wes Craven, John Carpenter, Rob Zombie, all the way back to the guys making horror movies in the 50s to the guys making the paranormal activities and the Conjuring movies and stuff all together. And I sat one night next to Quentin Tarantino, and he said, I really loved your Friday was really great. I really enjoyed it. But my favorite one is Part 5. I said, really? And he goes, yeah, it's because it was like sleazy bad. It was like everything one of these movies should be. It should be like, you want to take a shower afterwards. It was just had all those elements. So, from his standpoint, the genre is supposed to be as despicable as possible, which is what he thought was so cool about it. Mm-hmm. So you never know. People, choose their Fridays according to which one they saw first, which got them into it, or something that just so surprised them and entertained them when they were with a group of people and everybody absolutely loved it the night they went and saw it, and that's it. That's the best one. So it always fascinates me how people, have their favorites.
I absolutely hate Part 5. Let me rephrase it. I don't hate Part 5. I felt cheated at the end of Part 5. I did fall in that category, but when you mention 9, let me ask you, I have a soft spot for 9. I actually really enjoy 9. What did you think of the whole Jason being a body jumper and the Born Through the Voorhees, and what did you think of that direction of it?
It's so funny because I just yesterday read a big long interview with Adam Marcus about all that. So I'm really sort of biased now to what he was saying about what he was trying to do. And I mean, he was very young, 22, 23 or something, and Sean was basically giving him, the gold card to go in there and make a Friday the 13th, but don't do it with Jason. But he knew he still had to do it with Jason, but do something else with it. So this kind of Evil Dead type, idea, along with the fact that, he's going to go from person to person, so you don't know who Jason is, were things that they all thought might be really cool because you hadn't seen that before. And then he wanted to have a sense of humor with it, which nothing wrong with that. So all his intentions were absolutely right. It just gets down to, what a hardcore fan feels is where they want to see their monster go. And certain people really hated that, and other people said, well, just got to judge it on its own merits, and what's good about it is good. And what isn't true to what somebody feels is the way Jason should be, portrayed, then those people are going to be, pissed about it. But I don't know, as a kid, I so loved all the Frankenstein movies. When I go back and look at them now, some of them are really not that good. The first two, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein were great, but then they were kind of stretched after that. But then, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
I was going to say, I love that one. Yes, that's the best one.
Yeah. So, it's like, well, yeah, but he's not really a star of it. I love all these other guys, and it's like the comics. And I go, I don't care. Glenn Strange did a great Frankenstein. Bella, was great to see Bella doing that again, and Lon Chaney, and there was something just very kind of, cozy, fun horror than really trying to push it into, its same format or same formula. So I think, like anything else, people have to somehow be okay when a sequel is something different, and if it's too different, then it's like this isn't the kind of movie I bought a ticket for. Or if it's too much the same as the original or the one that just came before it, then it's like, we saw this, right? There's nothing different about it. So it's a really tough thing, for filmmakers to come up with something that, somehow is going to please both audiences. And that's the tough thing. When John Carpenter decided, there's going to be no more Mike Myers, come part 3, poor Tommy Wallace had to, go in and do something that was, a good movie in and of itself, but it wasn't a Halloween in the way that people wanted to see a Halloween movie.
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is the greatest horror movie ever made, in my opinion.
Oh, really? Okay, there you go.
And if it would have just came, and I get what Carpenter, he wanted a different Halloween movie every year, but if it would have just been Season of the Witch, it would have been loved from the get-go. But when it was Halloween 3 and there's no Haddonfield, no Michael Myers especially, everyone hated it. I mean, you figure that movie came out how many years ago, and just within the last 3 or 4 years are people starting to appreciate it and like it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, he did a really good job on it, but you can't buck what people expectation factors are. That's the hardest thing. A good James Bond movie, and I do love the recent Bond movies because they're just spectacular, and makes for a whole kind of a Bond, which I think really works. It's been completely different style in terms of the wisecracking stuff's gone and all that, and the stunt sequences, the action sequences are just unbelievable. The benefit of CGI to do some of these things, but they still pull them off. But there's still all these old school guys like me going, it's still not Sean Connery, it's still not Dr. No, it's still not, the Goldfinger and the girl getting painted. And I mean, we have all these, great loves of those movies that we saw when, we were teenagers in our early 20s.
Do you think Jason has stayed so timeless because, Halloween just kind of recently got revamped, but, I mean, Halloween was... After part 4, it was really downhill because they kept trying to change everything, where Jason, even though they'd add in, like you said, here's the Carrie or the new locale and the flavor of the year, so to speak, it was still guy in a hockey mask, he's at the camp, people come, he kills them. Do you think that simplicity is what's kept it alive so well?
That's a really good question. I think there's something, when we embrace the anti-hero as the hero of the movie, where it's like people sort of cheered when Jason killed people, as opposed to what all the shit was originally. Was it supposed to scare you? Yeah. That this guy's supposed to, you're supposed to care about the people and be scared of the monster. And now we're, going into a whole other league, and the people that had, like the Death Wish series, with Charles Bronson, mm-hmm. He was justified in his feelings about going after these punks that were responsible for the death of his wife or his daughter. I can't even remember at this point, but what was it both?
Well, you gotta get the wife in part 1.
It was like, okay.
Part 2, and yeah.
Yeah, if this person was at all a scumbag of any sort, it's like, okay, to murder him. And, like we were fine with that kind of stuff. And as the years went on, it became more and more apparent that people did want to get their aggressive side out, through the monster and that identification, with them. And, Jason obviously had that, plus the fact that he had a mask on, and people always feel more empowered as soon as you put a mask on. You feel like you can get away with anything, because they can't see your face. Yeah. And, Freddy had to have, the one-liners and things, which became kind of tiring after a while because it just, like James Bond, it just became too many, wise guy things, and people sort of got tired of that. And so, everybody starts to get, exhausted over a period of time when something somehow isn't fresh, but they don't want it too different because it's like, that's not the character we know and love. So it's really tricky, but as I said, I think the fact that we really haven't had any real monsters that had a series of things since the 80s, and, we have Chucky, we have Pinhead, we have Michael Myers, obviously, and Freddy, and, there were so many that have this whole, it's what I call the Wizard of Oz syndrome. Wizard of Oz was not like the big hit, just like It's a Wonderful Life was not the big hit, as it is now at Christmas. But once it started to come to your home every year, or once a year, it was like religion. You did nothing that night because Wizard of Oz was on, and and you could only see it that one time a year. That's it. But it was coming into your home in a way that you really began to identify with the characters and everything. And everybody could quote lines from the Wizard of Oz just seeing it once a year. And it just became this huge thing. So when video started to become whether it was beta or VHS or DVD or laser disc or whatever, you now own these movies. You can watch them 50 fucking times in a row and still, now you own that movie in a way. It's, part of you. And so when the next time, one was going to come in the theater, people went in droves, and you watched like the audience build every single Nightmare on Elm Street, as those things went along. But when it first came out, it was like something new. Like, certain people loved it. Those of us who were horror fans really appreciated it. But in terms of popularity, it took, 2 or 3 before they really, got that huge mainstream audience.
Now, do you think that the Tommy Jarvis character, do you think he can still come back when this lawsuit's settled, when they do future films? Hopefully soon? Well,
Vincent DeSante is certainly keeping, Tommy alive with his, don't hike in the woods. And then the new one, Don't Hike Alone in the Snow. He's got Tommy Jarvis back, and he's also got Vinny Gustafaro, who was the deputy from My Friday, back. And so he's trying to keep that storyline going in a different way, where these guys are older now, and yet Jason is still, coming back to that place. Whether when I considered writing another Friday, certainly it went through my mind about trying to get Jennifer Cook and Tom Matthews back together. They're older now, they're settled, but they have, teenage kids who had heard about this thing that the parents tried to keep quiet, and, they end up, going to the camp, and of course the parents find out about it, so then it was going to be, Tommy and Megan back at it, fighting Jason again, much older but wiser. And then I thought, I don't somehow I feel like I'm forcing that. It doesn't feel like a natural thing, that the kids happen to go back and stuff. So I kind of dropped it, and I was kind of happy I did, because when I went and saw Never Hike Alone, I was like, holy shit, there's Tom Matthews. Vincent jumped on that idea, and it was a wonderful surprise for everybody at the end of the movie. So I just think, if you're going to try to do it mainstream again, I don't know. Vincent's creating his own mythology here with what happened to Tommy and the town and stuff. Whether somebody would embrace that, I don't know. And if Victor Miller wins the lawsuit, he's already got a deal to do a total remake of the original Friday the 13th. Because he, so far in the lawsuit, he won, but he didn't win Jason. He got the name Friday the 13th, and he got the ability to remake that story again. So, that can certainly happen, as probably the easiest thing. Then the question becomes, if whoever ends up having Jason, will they want to just start at the beginning again, and go all through them, or come in later on, or literally do modern day again? I don't know, and that's how the powers that be that are the people that own the coins and live in the big towers, what they somehow think people are going to want. But I wrote mine from the standpoint of a fan. Over the years I've become a fan and talked to the fans about the ones they love and what they love about them. So I really went in there going, all right, I'm one of these guys that's been waiting, 10 years. I want to see some shit that's going to entertain me, and it's going to be cool, and it's going to have some new kind of kills, and it's going to have some new elements, and it's going to have some sort of connection to the past with the other ones. So, I went at it that way, and whether the suits are going to feel that way, when the lawsuit ends and, I jump out there with the script, say, how about this? I don't know. I mean, I can only hope, that whoever is in charge, is a fan of Jason Lives and is a fan of, what I've come up with. But it's hard to tell, It might not be the first of the new ones coming out, maybe the third or second, I don't know. I just, want to get it made because, the fan part of me is still going, yeah, I'd love to see this happen, some way, somehow, and kind of give the audience that same kind of, entertainment of horror. And there's not as much comedy in the new one. It's a little more pedal to the metal, but there is dark comedy in it, and these girls are really tough-ass girls. So there's a lot of, kind of funny bantering between them that's edgy and things, but it's not like, sort of the what do you call it, irreverence that I had in, Jason Lives, with the whole making jokes about, Jason and, oh yeah, he was like this thing, and, do we believe it, do we not believe it? These are just people that innocently walk into the situation and have serious repercussions.
Do you think they should have done a remake, or you think they should have just made what would it have been then, if you don't count Freddy, Jason, and I guess you got to count that, just made a part 12?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know. I think it was the usual thing of, well, we know we can use this title, and we know that really, means a lot to a lot of people. And then there was a whole generation that they figured hadn't even seen the first one, so they somehow felt okay to, make one that didn't necessarily follow what the actual first one did, but it had all the elements that we've come to know as a Friday the 13th. And there's a lot of people that just, love it. It's just like with the Halloween things with Rob Zombie. I kind of, had a, negative reaction when I first, saw it. And then as the time's gone on, I went, he really embraced what Rob Zombie likes to do. And, I can't fault him for that. It's just, it's very hard. I mean, it's really hard for those of us, like, I saw Halloween on the Friday night when it first was released, with a crowd that had no idea what they were going to see. And I saw people jump out of their fucking seats. I'm not exaggerating, like 2-3 feet in the air. I mean, it was like a roller coaster, dropping and going up and down, and popcorn flying in the air because people get so scared the popcorn would go up or their drinks would go up. It was an amazing event. So once you've had something like that, everything after that, sort of pales in comparison. The same thing with The Exorcist, seeing The Exorcist the first week and seeing, grown men pass out in front of you. People like frozen in the aisles when the thing was over. They didn't know whether to leave or stay there. They were so traumatized. And, women, like screaming and fainting as well. I mean, it was just absolute craziness for a movie. And those kinds of things, I don't think we're ever going to see that again, because we've all become so passive with watching TV at home and not really having to react. But trying to come up with stuff to get an audience to do that again, to me is a great goal, because that's so important. But easier thing to do in terms of getting money is remake something that's already been successful. It's got, already a built-in audience from the title. The fathers can bring their kids to it, and, there'll be kids' new, passion because they never saw one of these things before. And they're just always really trying to hedge their bets, financially. And sometimes it works. Like I thought it, obviously did that with people. Not that many people saw the miniseries or saw it so long ago they kind of forgot it. So up comes this brand new monster, Pennywise, and for a lot of people, that's it. That's the coming of the new monster. So, and I thought from all standpoints, they hit all the right buttons in terms of the kids that we cared about. all the elements that, really make these things somehow relatable and scary at the same time. But, when I saw part 2, it wasn't quite as good.
It was too long.
Yeah, that too.
Too long.
Which is always the problem. They always think, no, people are paying all this money. We're going to have them stay there for 2.5 hours. It's like, no. People get worn out. You lose, the attention. It's really hard to keep everything going for that length of time.
Now, my son loved part 2. He's, like I said, he would still been 11 when he would have been 10 when we saw it. He loved it. To me, my thing was, once you're pushing 3 hours, I've already invested 2.5 hours in part 1, and whether it be the new or the original, that film is only really interesting when they're kids, because as adults, in my opinion, they were all pretty miserable, boring people. So yeah. I think that hurt it too. And plus, then it just became, it was just a Bill Hader comedy, basically. It was. But I do remember when they announced it, and everybody was so mad. Like, there's only one Pennywise, it's Tim Curry, and once they saw the new one, it was like, oh, this is so much better. It was just, that was one that actually, whereas Pet Sematary, the remake, everybody hated for a good reason. I don't have anything good to say. I like the ending of the new one better, but I'm talking about the last 30 seconds of a 2-hour film I liked.
Yeah. I think it was Mick Garris once said to me, don't you hate when you go and you see a movie that starts good and then it's just so boring all the way through, and then they go and do this great ending, so everybody walks out going, yeah, that wasn't so bad, and you forget that, almost all of it was dreck, except the very beginning that grabbed your attention and the very end, which you went out on a great note. And a lot of movies, somehow get away with that. If you could basically make something that could keep people in their seats for 90 minutes and then give them a Carrie-like jump scare at the end, so they all are like buzzing as they walk out of the theater, that sometimes is the ticket for somebody to tell, yeah, you should go there. I jumped out of my seat at the end.
Well, so, I always tell everybody, because, Friday the 13th had so many ripoffs. Of course, one of them was Sleepaway Camp. It's like, you have to watch this movie. It's like, it's not a particularly good movie. It's kind of a dull movie, but that last scene, last 15 seconds will leave you with such a holy shit moment. You'll remember the movie the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
I even when I was showing it to my wife, she was like, this isn't very good. I was like, there's a payoff here. You just got to trust me. And, you never, that's a movie you never forget the ending of.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, nobody saw that coming.
No, it was impossible. And the sequels, then they just changed into hokey slashers, which they were fun.
Yeah.
But, I really like Jason. Like, 4 is my favorite. 6 is my second favorite. I won't lie to you.
That's fine. I've been, I've been feeling the same way. Except I would put part 1 before mine even.
I have to re-ask again. So, with Jason's Voorhees' dad, was he envisioned ever to be like, he knew what his son was, he was evil as well, or did it just never really get past that original stage of just showing him?
Well, if you see the storyboards that were done, there was a point, what was it? I think it was in the Crystal Lake Memories when they released that. Mm-hmm. They, got me to talk to this illustrator, and he did a series of, illustrations of the ending as I, originally envisioned it with the caretaker and Jason's father. And Jason's father, I was really kind of going towards a almost, out of period Svengali-ish type villain. Something about his eyes, something about his manner. He was not this big hulky guy, that they, I think they ended up calling him Elias. Mm-hmm. And, what I did in the Pamela Voorhees tapes, which are part of the Friday the 13th game, they're sort of the things that you find bits and pieces as you're playing the game.
My son constantly kills me in that game. I don't play it that often.
But, my job was to kind of go in there and, have her, Pamela Voorhees talking about her son and everything that led up to his drowning, and while she's talking to the police, they're still out in the lake, searching for Jason. And one of the things she brings up is they said, your husband Elias, and she stops him and says, that's yes, that was my husband, but that's not Jason's father. Excuse me? And so I wanted to throw that out there that, what we've been seeing, yes, married to her, yes, Mr. Voorhees, but no, the result of some of his incredible power and pure evil was a result of what was in his father. So I kind of took it a different way. And like anything else, some people could say, well, that's, I don't buy that. I like the idea that he was this big brute guy that beat her, beat her when she was pregnant. That's why Jason came out the way he came out. And, I felt, I liked the idea that she killed him too, got out of there with her son, because he was always bragging on Jason. But there was nothing other than a kind of a brute of a guy. So story-wise, I think, it kind of is what the next filmmaker that tackles that aspect of the story, wants to do with him. There's obviously two roads that I know of, and maybe there's a third.
Well, do you think with the lawsuit, what is your, if you had to make just a quick guess, they do another Jason movie, do you think we're going to forget that little remake happened, or we're going to continue with the remake, or what do you think the studio is going to envision it to do?
I really wished I had a crystal ball, sitting here with a script I really would love to see get made. That I'm doing two things wrong, I think, in a studio standpoint. I'm not picking up where they left off, in the 12th one, or was it the 11th one that was Jason Goes to Hell?
Jason Goes to Hell was 9.
9, okay. What was like the 11th one that before the remake? Was that?
It was either 10
Jason.
Or if you want to call it was when he fought Freddy. I don't consider that part, but they do for some reason.
Yeah. But, he went so all over the place. To me, it kind of, I don't know how you would pick that up, as a place. And plus, one thing I've learned from all the fans over the years is they love the whole nostalgic aspect of the 80s. There was something about that. Oh, yeah. There was, more innocence. There's something there that, that's part of the reason, I set mine in the 90s, because the 80s, like any generation, whatever was the, 10 years before that all spills into the next one. And then as you're kind of moving into the one that's coming up, but there's always that kind of hangover. And since I wanted to be 13 years, I set it at 1999 and kind of embracing that whole idea that the adults, not the kids, but the adults were scared to death that when we hit 2000, the shit was going to hit the fan and the computers are all going to go down. The world was going to blow up or something. But there was that fear that was kind of out there, in the world, but it has nothing to do with the story or nothing to, do with Jason or the girls. It's just something that's sort of talked about how screwed up their parents are, how easily scared they are about something so stupid. So, for me, part of setting it then is so that I could still kind of get that, nostalgic buzz from that time period in the looks and the language and kind of in the innocence of not having, seen these, all of these things that they're Catholic girls, so they were not supposed to go and be seeing all these horror movies and stuff. So, but again, that's my feeling. That's my take on it. And I honest to God don't know what, Warner Brothers and New Line are going to, decide, is the best way to go. I just know, they wouldn't even read my script because they were like, no, as long as this lawsuit's going to go on, and it's going to go on for a while, we're not looking at any material. And if Sean doesn't really want to do another masked Jason Voorhees, if that's really true, then that'll be interesting if he's in charge of the rights. Will he go and do that anyway? I don't know. But that's the big question. What will be, the way to get back into the series again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Like I said, you're listening to this on Halloween. You've obviously, your Jason is a timeless one. You incorporated the Universal monsters. You incorporated some humor in it. Do you have anything to say to all the fans out there?
Well, I got to say thank you, like we all do. You've made something that was kind of a job at its time for most of us, given us a future of so many people just absolutely loving it. I know somebody said to me, I could go and meet James Whale, who did, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. I'd go nuts. So for a lot of people, they treat me that way because I did Jason Lives. I brought back Jason that was supposedly dead. So, all that kind of thing, you just absolutely, you can't help but love because people are so sincere and the fans are always really sweet, wonderful people. So, a big thank you there. And the other thing is, I got to say, I have to admit that we have a whole new generation of filmmakers now who are making these fan-funded films. The fans are putting the money in, the fans are making them, and a lot of them, that I've seen are actually really, really good. Mm-hmm. And there's, one coming out today for Halloween called Voorhees, and everything I've read about it is, really good. And there's been, obviously Vincent's one, and Vengeance is doing another one. I just think we've never had that ever happen, where fans are basically saying, look, if you're not going to give us the movies, we want to see, we're going to make them ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's amazingly cool to me. That it's a whole nother way of looking at cinema. That the people rise up and say, we're going to make our own. I don't think I've ever seen that happen with any other genre.
For all the fans out there, can they find you online? Are you on Twitter, Facebook? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I'm on, all the usual, I'm usually down as Tommy McLoughlin because of the band, the Sloths that I was in. That as a performer, I usually, sort of delineate, that's Tommy who's the performer, and Tom McLoughlin is the guy that writes and directs. So a lot of the sites on the internet are mainly say, TommyMcLoughlin.com or Facebook or even Instagram. So they can certainly, reach out to me there.
Well, I want to thank you for your movie, and I also want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us today.
Oh, my pleasure, and happy Halloween, everyone.
Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. You have been listening to the Chronicles of Hollywood History. Thank you from Gomez Richmond Productions.